The week before I came to Uganda, I read Erik Larson's In the Garden of Beasts. It's the story of William Dodd, the US ambassador in 1930s Germany. Hitler had just come to power, and Dodd's job was to report back to America what was happening and how afraid the rest of the world should be. For months before he arrived, he heard reports from embassy staff that Hitler was gathering power, that he was cracking down on the city's minorities, that he was preparing for something great and horrible. His first few nights in Berlin, he stayed at a fancy hotel near the Brandenburg Gate, waiting for the ambassador's residence to be prepared. Every day, he walked through the park in the middle of the city. He saw couples walking arm in arm, old men feeding ducks at the pond, children walking home from school. Everything seemed so calm and civilized, he thought. It can't really be so bad here, can it? William Dodd was wrong. The diplomats walking their dogs in Tiergarten, the young couples laughing outside restaurants and nightclubs in Potsdamer Platz, they weren't a sign of the underlying condition of the country, they were an exception to it. William Dodd wasn't in the rooms where political decisions were being made, and he wasn't visiting the neighborhoods where they were being carried out. It took more than a year, and the deaths of some of his friends, for him to start to believe the reports he was hearing, for him to really see what was happening in the city around him. I've been thinking a lot about Erik Larson's book this week. As a foreign aid worker, this is how I see Uganda most of the time, driving past it in a van, watching it through darkened windows. I've been here 2 weeks now. I'm doing a human rights project with a local NGO. My Ugandan colleague told me a story. A few weeks ago, she was visiting one of the prisons here to inspect it. She told the warden she wanted to interview some of the prisoners to ask them about their living conditions. He said she couldn't. "This is my mandate," she said. "You are statutorily obligated to allow me access to these prisoners to assess their conditions." "Oh, I know," he said. "All that's fine. The only problem is, it's laundry day. Each prisoner has only one uniform. This morning they washed their pants and underwear, and they've hung them up to dry. You're welcome to interview them, but they're all naked from the waist down." Did you ever do those optical tests in school? The ones where they show you the word yellow, but it's in red letters? And they flash it really quickly, and you have to say the color of the letters, not what they say. Blue. Green. Purple. It's hard, right? If the words were written in a different language, it would be simple. But once you know how to read, it's like your brain only knows that one skill. Like one type of information crowds out the other one. Part of our project is interviewing NGOs about the conditions here. They tell us Uganda has fewer than 50 labor inspectors in a country with 40 million people. The industrial court got shut down in 2007 and just re-established this year. That means that for 8 years, if workers weren't being paid for overtime or they were being locked into their workplaces, there was no one to complain to. Even when labor inspectors did find violations, they couldn't file them anywhere so they'd be prosecuted. Most of the infrastructure, some of the roads we're driving on, are built by Chinese companies. A government engineer tells us the companies provide him with resumes for workers they're bringing over from China, tell him they're technicians and geologists. Ugandans don't have the skills we need, they tell him. We have to bring in our own workers. Then he goes to the work sites, and he finds the same Chinese workers in the kitchens or working as drivers, and hardly any Ugandans employed. We drive 2 hours from Kampala to see the hydroelectric dams. Thousands of people were resettled from the banks of the Nile, paid in promises of better living conditions, steady jobs. We get there, and we see the power lines going over the communities that got moved. They're still lit by candles and generators. Electricity goes to the capital, and so did the jobs. The minimum wage here is 6,000 shillings a month, or about $2. It hasn't been updated since 1984. The government has never revoked an investment license. Not when the rivers next to the factories get those rainbow slicks on the top of them. And not when workers file complaints that their bosses told them receiving this month's salary means signing a declaration that they won't ask for last month's. We hear about a guy living in rural Uganda whose goats, his most valuable property and his only source of income, got stolen in the middle of the night. When he contacted the cops, they told him if he wanted them to investigate, he'd have to pay a bribe. So he did. When he asked a few months later why he had never been contacted again, they told him they lost his police report. So he paid another bribe, and they found it. I took all this footage on the drive between Kampala, Jinja, and Entebbe, 3 of the bigger cities in Uganda, just a few hours away from each other. It's easy to look out the window and feel like I know this place, like I understand it, to forget that I've only seen a tiny dotted line across less than 1% of it. Like William Dodd, I have to remind myself that looking is not seeing. It's obvious as soon as you arrive that people are poor here. It's less obvious that this is something that was done to them. Before we leave, I asked my colleague, "So, after the warden didn't let you interview the prisoners naked from the waist down, what did you do?" "I came back the next day," she said. "It was Shirts Day."